Katherine stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, her golden gown swirling softly around her as she surveyed the scene before her. The lights sparkled like 1,000 stars, reflecting off the crystal chandeliers that hung from the soaring ceilings of the lavish venue. Laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses filled the air, blending together in a symphony of wealth and privilege. Yet despite the opulence surrounding her, a hollow feeling gnawed at her insides. "Isn't it just magnificent?" her friend Clara exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement as she twirled in her own extravagant dress. "Just look at all these people. We're so lucky to be a part of it all." Katherine forced a smile, nodding absently as she took another sip of her champagne. The bubbles tickled her nose, but the drink felt more like a prop than a pleasure. She glanced around at the sea of familiar faces, wealthy socialites, influential businessmen, and philanthropic elites who all seemed to revel in their status. They radiated confidence, purpose, and an unshakable belief in their place in the world. Katherine, on the other hand, felt like an imposter in her own life. "Are you okay, Kat?" Clara asked, her tone shifting to one of concern. "You seem a bit distant tonight." "Oh, I'm fine," Katherine replied quickly, her voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. "Just thinking, I guess." "Thinking? At a gala like this? You should be living in the moment." Clara laughed, nudging her playfully. "Come on, let's dance. You need to loosen up." Katherine let out a soft sigh, allowing Clara to pull her onto the dance floor where couples swirled around them, lost in the rhythm of the music. She moved mechanically, her body following Clara's lead while her mind wandered elsewhere, somewhere far from the bright lights and polished smiles. As she danced, she caught sight of a group of guests gathered near the entrance, their animated conversation drawing her attention. A tall man with an easy smile and an unassuming demeanor stood in the center, passionately discussing the nonprofit organization he had founded to help the homeless. His name was Jake, though she had only heard it whispered among the elite circles. It's not just about providing shelter," he said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "It's about restoring hope and dignity. Each person on the street has a story, a life worth fighting for. We can't just turn a blind eye." Katherine's heart raced as she listened, her curiosity piqued. The other guests seemed skeptical, some rolling their eyes while others exchanged dismissive glances. They were used to charity, to donations that made them feel good, but they rarely engaged with the true issues at hand. Jake, however, was different. There was a fire in his eyes that captivated her. "Who is that?" she whispered to Clara, breaking away from the dance. "Oh, that's Jake. He runs that non-profit. What's it called? Hope for Tomorrow, I think. I heard he used to be homeless himself. He's kind of a big deal in the non-profit world," Clara replied, her disinterest evident. "But honestly, Kat, it's just a charity. What's the point of getting all worked up about it?" Katherine felt a twinge of irritation at Clara's nonchalance, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Jake's words held more weight than the rest of the evening's shallow conversations. She watched as he gestured animatedly, his passion drawing in a small crowd. A knot of curiosity tightened in her stomach, urging her to learn more. "Let's go talk to him," Katherine said abruptly, her voice firm. "Are you serious? Why would you want to waste time with him?" Clara asked, bewildered. "He's just one of those do-gooders trying to make himself feel better." "Maybe he's onto something," Katherine replied, her resolve solidifying. "I want to hear what he has to say." Pushing through the throngs of elegantly dressed guests, Katherine approached Jake, who was now in the middle of recounting a particularly harrowing story about a family he had helped find housing after living in their car for months. And when they finally got the keys to their new apartment, the look on their faces was priceless. "It's moments like that that remind me why I do this work," Jake said, his voice filled with conviction. Katherine cleared her throat, and the group turned to her, surprised by the interruption. "Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear," she said, her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "I'm Katherine. I'd love to know more about your organization, if you don't mind." Jake's eyes lit up with enthusiasm as he smiled at her. Of course. It's always great to meet someone interested in making a difference. Hope for Tomorrow focuses on providing not just temporary shelter, but also job training and support services to help people rebuild their lives. Katherine's heart raced as he spoke. His genuine compassion was palpable. "How did you get started?" she asked, genuinely intrigued. "I've been where many of these people are," Jake admitted, his expression shifting to one of somber reflection. "I lived on the streets for a long time, and I know how it feels to be invisible. But I also know that with the right support, change is possible. I started this organization to give others the chance I was given." The group around them listened intently, the dismissive attitudes fading as they were drawn into Jake's narrative. Katherine felt a surge of admiration for him, a man who had turned his pain into purpose. It was an awakening, a call to action that resonated deep within her. "Can I ask you something?" Katherine ventured, her curiosity taking the lead. "What do you think the biggest misconception is about homelessness?" Jake paused, his gaze steady. "That it's a choice. Many people think that those who are homeless simply don't want to work or improve their situation. The reality is far more complex. People become homeless for a myriad of reasons: job loss, medical issues, family crises. The truth is, it can happen to anyone." Katherine's breath caught in her throat. She had never considered the issue in such depth. The privilege of her upbringing had shielded her from the harsh realities of life outside her bubble. "I'd love to learn more," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Perhaps I could volunteer or help in some way." Jake's smile widened, genuine and warm. "That would be fantastic. We're always looking for passionate people who want to make a difference. We're hosting a community outreach event tomorrow, and I'd be thrilled to have you there." The suggestion ignited something within Katherine, a spark of purpose that had long felt dormant. "I'll be there," she promised, her heart racing with anticipation. It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. A divergence from the empty glamour of her world towards something more meaningful. As the night wore on, Katherine found herself drifting back to the dance floor, her mind buzzing with possibilities. Her laughter mingled with the others, but this time it felt different. Beneath the glitz and glamour, she had uncovered a thread of connection to the world outside her privileged existence. A world that mattered. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of purpose stirring within her, awakening her from the shadows of her opulent life. Little did she know, the next day would mark the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and the world around her. Katherine stepped into the nonprofit's modest building, her designer heels clicking against the worn wooden floor. The air was thick with the scent of coffee, mixed with the faint aroma of something simmering in the kitchen. She felt out of place amidst the hustle and bustle of volunteers sorting donations and preparing meals for the community. The bright lights overhead contrasted starkly with the dim ambiance of her luxurious Manhattan penthouse. She adjusted her oversized handbag, feeling the weight of her sheltered life pressing down on her. Her heart raced as she scanned the room, taking in the diverse group of people working together, united by a common purpose that felt foreign to her. "Excuse me, can I help you?" A voice interrupted her thoughts. Katherine turned to see Jake approaching her, his demeanor warm and inviting. He wore a simple t-shirt with the nonprofit's logo and jeans, his appearance unpretentious compared to the polished look she was accustomed to. His eyes, however, held a depth of understanding that instantly put her at ease. I'm Katherine," she stammered, extending her hand. "I came to see the organization and learn more about what you do here." "Nice to meet you, Katherine. I'm Jake," he replied, shaking her hand firmly but gently. "It's great to have you here. I can show you around if you'd like." Katherine nodded, a mix of curiosity and trepidation coursing through her. As they walked through the building, Jake pointed out various areas: the food pantry, the resource center, the small library filled with donated books. He spoke with passion about each initiative, his. dedication evident in the way he animatedly described the impact they had on the community. "This is the heart of our operation," Jake said, stopping in front of a vibrant mural painted by volunteers depicting scenes of hope and resilience. "We believe in empowering people, not just providing handouts. It's about dignity, you know?" Katherine nodded, absorbing his words. "That's really inspiring," she replied, though she couldn't shake the feeling of inadequacy that lingered in her mind. "I've never really been involved in anything like this." "You'd be surprised at what you can achieve when you step out of your comfort zone," Jake encouraged, his gaze steady. "What brings you here today? It's not every day I see someone from the upper echelon of society taking an interest in our work." Katherine hesitated, her instincts telling her to keep her privileged background under wraps. "I guess I just wanted to understand more about the issues facing the homeless community. I've heard some things at events, but it always feels so distant." Jake's expression softened. "It's easy to feel detached when you're not directly affected. But everyone has a story, and understanding those stories is the first step toward making a difference. Would you like to meet some of the people we serve?" Katherine's heart raced at the thought. She had never interacted with individuals facing such hardships, and a part of her felt terrified. Still, a stronger part of her craved the experience, eager to break free from the confines of her sheltered upbringing. "Yes, I would," she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. Jake led her into a cozy common area where several clients were gathered, some engaged in conversation, while others quietly read or worked on crafts. As they entered, the atmosphere shifted slightly. Katherine noticed a few curious glances directed her way. She took a deep breath, willing herself to project confidence. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Katherine," Jake announced, gesturing for her to step forward. "She's here to learn about our work and the people we serve." "Hi," Katherine said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "I'm really looking forward to hearing your stories." A middle-aged woman with striking silver hair and kind eyes smiled at her from across the room. "You're brave to come here, dear," she said. "It's not every day someone like you steps into our world." Katherine felt her cheeks flush at the woman's words. "I'm just trying to understand," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Understanding is the first step," Jake chimed in, his voice encouraging. "Each of you has your own journey, and Katherine is here to listen." As the conversations began to unfold, Katherine found herself captivated by the stories shared. One man recounted his struggle with addiction, detailing the moment he decided to seek help and turn his life around. A young woman spoke of the challenges she faced as a single mother living in a shelter, her determination to provide a better life for her children evident in her voice. Katherine listened, absorbing their experiences like a sponge. Each story peeled back layers of her own understanding, challenging the preconceived notions she had held about homelessness and poverty. She felt a growing connection to these individuals, their humanity shining through the difficulties they faced. "I've lived a privileged life," she admitted during a lull in the conversation, her voice trembling slightly. "I've never had to worry about where my next meal would come from, or if I'd have a roof over my head." A young man with a shy smile replied, "That's okay. We all have different paths, but it's important to recognize that we're all human, no matter our circumstances." Katherine nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat as she reflected on her own life. She had always been surrounded by wealth and luxury, yet she had never truly appreciated what it meant to struggle. "I want to help," she said earnestly, "but I don't know how." Jake stepped in, his voice steady. "Helping isn't just about throwing money at a problem. It's about being present, showing compassion, and understanding the needs of the community. You're already taking a huge step by being here today." As the day wore on, Jake invited Katherine to join them for a community meal that would take place later in the evening. "It's a chance for everyone to come together, share food, and connect," he explained. "I think it would be a great way for you to see the community in a different light." Katherine hesitated. The thought of sitting down to dinner with people whose lives were so vastly different from hers, was daunting, but the spark of curiosity ignited within her. "I'd love to," she replied, her determination growing stronger. As she helped set up for the meal, Katherine began to feel a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. The volunteers laughed and shared stories, and for the first time, she felt a connection that transcended her wealth and privilege. She was no longer just Katherine, the affluent socialite. She was part of something greater, a community effort to uplift those in need. When the meal finally began, Katherine sat at a long table filled with people from all walks of life: volunteers, clients, and staff. The food was simple but hearty, and as they shared the meal, laughter and conversation filled the air. Katherine marveled at how the barriers she had perceived began to dissolve as she engaged with those around her. "Thank you for being here, Katherine," the silver-haired woman said, her eyes twinkling with warmth. "It means a lot to us." Katherine smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you for welcoming me. I want to learn more about your experiences." As the night wore on, Katherine felt a shift within herself. The world she had known, filled with lavish parties and societal expectations, began to fade into the background. Here, in this room, she saw the raw beauty of resilience, the strength of community, and the undeniable humanity that connected them all. For the first time, Katherine felt she was beginning to understand the true meaning of compassion, and she knew this was only the beginning of her journey. The community meal had drawn to a close, and the air was filled with the sense of hearty stew and freshly baked bread, remnants of warmth lingering amid the cool autumn night. As the last plates were cleared away and laughter faded into the background, Katherine found herself standing outside the small non-profit building, her heart racing in a way she had never expected. The stars twinkled above, a tapestry of light that felt both distant and intimate, and she turned to Jake, who stood beside her, a steady presence in the cool evening. "I can't believe I just did that," Katherine said, her voice a mix of disbelief and exhilaration. "I really talked to them. I mean, really talked." Jake smiled softly, his eyes reflecting the glow of the street lamp nearby. "You did more than that, Katherine. You listened. That's what they need the most, someone who cares enough to hear their stories." She looked down at her hands, momentarily lost in thought. "I've been surrounded by people my whole life, yet I've never felt so connected to anyone until now. It's like they're real." Her voice caught on the last word, reminding her of the privilege that had wrapped her in a cocoon of ignorance for so long. "They are real," Jake replied, leaning against the building, arms crossed. "And they're fighting battles you can't even imagine. Each one has a story, a reason for where they are. I was one of them, not too long ago." Katherine turned her gaze to him, curiosity igniting her interest. "You mentioned your past earlier, but you didn't go into much detail. What happened?" Jake took a deep breath, the weight of his memories palpable. "I was homeless for years. I lost everything. My job, my family, everything. I hit rock bottom and it was terrifying. But there were people who saw me, who didn't look away. They helped me get back on my feet." "What were they like?" Katherine leaned in closer, her eyes wide with genuine interest. "They were just ordinary people," he said, his voice softening. "Some were volunteers at shelters, others were strangers who offered a kind word or a warm meal. It made a difference. It reminded me that I was still worthy of kindness." Katherine felt a pang in her chest as she thought about her own life. "I can't imagine being in that situation. It sounds brutal." "It was," Jake admitted, his expression serious. "But it also taught me empathy. I vowed that if I ever got the chance to help others, I would do everything I could to make a difference. That's why I started this nonprofit." Katherine watched him, captivated by the passion in his voice. "You're doing incredible work, Jake. It's inspiring." He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I'm just one person. There's still so much to be done, but every little bit helps, and seeing someone like you getting involved, that's what keeps me going." Catherine's heart swelled with a mix of pride and uncertainty. I want to do more. I've been so sheltered, so focused on my own world. I want to help, but I don't even know where to start. Start by being open, he suggested, his gaze steady. Talk to people, listen to their needs, and let your heart guide you. You have a lot of resources at your disposal. You can make a real impact. Resources, she echoed, the word feeling heavy on her tongue. It's hard to reconcile the life I live with the struggles of others. Sometimes I feel guilty just for having what I have. It's not about guilt, Jake replied, his voice firm yet gentle. It's about recognizing your privilege and using it to uplift others. You have the power to shine a light on issues that are often ignored. Katherine nodded slowly, her mind racing with possibilities. I want to help raise awareness, maybe even organize events, but I have to be careful, right? I don't want to be seen as just another rich girl playing at charity. That's the key, Jake said, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he were trying to gauge her sincerity. It's not about playing at anything. It's about being genuine. If you approach this from a place of authenticity, people will see that you're serious. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their conversation settling in the air around them. Katherine felt a warmth blooming in her chest, a sense of purpose stirring within her. For the first time, she could envision a future that involved not just her privilege, but also a commitment to making a difference. "What if I fail?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Failure is part of the journey," Jake replied, his tone reassuring. "What matters is that you try, and if you stumble, you pick yourself back up and keep going. That's what the people we serve do every day." Catherine's heart swelled with admiration for him, and she found herself leaning closer. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not easy, but it's worth it," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. "You have the ability to change lives, Katherine. Don't let fear hold you back." Just as the gravity of his words settled, Catherine's phone buzzed in her pocket, shattering the moment. She pulled it out and glanced at the screen, her stomach knotting at the sight of her father's name flashing ominously. "I should take this," she said, her voice tinged with reluctance. "Of course," Jake replied, stepping back slightly but maintaining a supportive gaze. "I'll be right here." Katherine pressed the green button, bringing the phone to her ear. "Dad?" "Katherine," her father's voice boomed through the speaker, authoritative and demanding. "Where are you? Your mother and I need you back at the penthouse. We have important business to discuss." "I was just at a community meal," she replied, trying to keep her tone even. "I lost track of time." "Community meal? That's not what we agreed upon," he snapped. "You're part of the family name now. You need to be present for the discussions about your future, especially with the Harringtons coming over." Catherine's heart sank as she heard the mention of the Harringtons, a wealthy family known for their connections and influence. The pressure to conform to her family's expectations weighed heavily on her. "I'll be there soon, Dad," she said, her voice faltering. "But can we talk about this later? I really want to help the homeless community." "Helping the homeless is noble, Katherine, but you also have responsibilities. You can't just throw your life away on charity work," he said, the disdain evident in his tone. As she listened to him, Katherine felt a familiar wave of frustration surge within her. "It's not just charity work, Dad. I've met real people with real struggles. I want to make a difference." "Enough of this," he snapped. "You're coming home now. We have plans, and they don't involve your whims." Katherine took a deep breath, trying to steady herself against the tide of his authoritative words. "I'll be there," she finally conceded, her heart heavy with resignation. She hung up, her thoughts swirling with confusion and resentment. When she looked back at Jake, she saw the understanding in his eyes. It was a look that made her feel seen in a way her father never did. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Katherine shook her head slightly, her voice tinged with frustration. "Just family business. You know how it goes." "I do," Jake said, stepping closer again. "But remember, You don't have to follow a path that isn't yours. You have the power to choose. As she stood there, Katherine felt torn between two worlds, the glitzy facade of her family's expectations and the raw, authentic reality that Jake represented. In that moment, she wished for nothing more than to bridge the gap between them. The stars above seemed to twinkle in agreement, urging her to find her true self amidst the chaos. "I want to choose," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I really do." Katherine sat at the long mahogany table in her family's opulent dining room, the weight of expectation pressing heavily upon her. The room was adorned with crystal chandeliers that cast a soft glow over the polished surface, reflecting the lavish lifestyle that had been her reality for as long as she could remember. Yet, despite the elegance, she felt a profound sense of unease. Around her, her family members, dressed in tailored suits and designer dresses, chattered about investments, social engagements, and the latest gossip from the Upper East Side. But Katherine's mind was elsewhere, wrestling with the recent experiences that had opened her eyes to a world she had long ignored. "Kat, dear, I think we've lost you," her father, Richard, boomed, his voice cutting through the din. His silver hair gleamed under the chandelier, and the sharpness in his gaze made her stomach clench. "We were just discussing the upcoming charity gala. You know how important it is for our family to maintain our social standing, especially with the Whitaker's daughter being courted by that charming banker." Katherine blinked, her heart racing. The Whitakers were one of the most influential families in their social circle, and the thought of being compared to their daughter made her skin crawl. I'm not really interested in that," she replied hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not interested?" Richard repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You're 26, Katherine. It's high time you start thinking seriously about your future. A marriage to someone of equal stature is not just beneficial, it's expected." Katherine's frustration bubbled beneath the surface. "But Dad, I want to make a difference. There's so much more out there than this." She gestured vaguely, encompassing the luxurious dining room and the life that felt suffocating. "I've been volunteering at a nonprofit that helps the homeless, and it's opened my eyes to real issues. I want to do something meaningful." Richard's expression hardened, his jaw setting in irritation. "Meaningful? You're speaking like a common idealist. Your mother and I worked tirelessly to give you this life, Katherine. You cannot throw it away for some fleeting passion. You need stability. You need to marry well, for your own sake and for the family's reputation." "Stability?" Katherine shot back, her voice rising. "Is being a trophy wife stability? I don't want to be just another name in your social circle. I want to be more than that." Her words hung in the air, charged with emotion, as the other family members exchanged glances, some with concern, others with disapproval. "Enough!" Richard's voice boomed, silencing the room. "We're not here to discuss your whims. We have a family legacy to uphold." He leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. "You will meet Charles Whitaker next week, and you will be polite. This is not up for debate." Katherine's heart sank. She felt trapped, caught between the life her family wanted for her and the life she yearned to create for herself. Her thoughts drifted to Jake, the passionate man who had shown her a glimpse of a world filled with empathy and purpose. She missed his presence, the way his stories ignited a fire within her. Was it possible to bridge the gap between these two worlds? "Let's change the subject," her mother Eleanor intervened, sensing the tension. "Who wants dessert?" As the conversation shifted to lighter topics, Katherine remained lost in her thoughts, her mind racing with the weight of her father's expectations. Later that evening, Katherine found herself pacing the marble floors of her penthouse, the city skyline stretching before her like a glittering tapestry of dreams and despair. She felt suffocated by the luxury that surrounded her. The designer furniture and the artwork that she had once adored now seemed like a gilded cage. She plopped down onto the plush sofa, the fabric cool against her skin. The silence of the apartment enveloped her, amplifying her inner turmoil. She pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over Jake's contact. The desire to reach out surged within her, but a nagging doubt held her back. He was busy with his nonprofit, working tirelessly to uplift those who had fallen through the cracks of society, while she was entrenched in a world of privilege and expectation. What could she possibly say that wouldn't sound trivial or self-indulgent? With a sigh, Katherine set her phone down, her gaze drifting to the city below. The streets were alive with people, some rushing to catch the subway, others gathering in small groups on street corners. She thought of Jake and how he had spoken about the resilience of those he helped. They were living, breathing stories of survival, each one a testament to the human spirit. Suddenly, her phone buzzed on the coffee table, interrupting her thoughts. It was a text from Jake. "Hey, Katherine, just finished a community meal. It went well. Hope you're doing okay. Let's catch up soon?" A smile crept onto her face. How could she resist the warmth of his words? She quickly typed back, "I'm okay. Just had a family meeting. It was intense. Can we meet tomorrow? I'd love to hear more about the meal." She hit send, her heart racing. As she awaited his reply, she couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. Jake was a grounding force in her life, a reminder of the importance of human connection beyond the confines of wealth and status. The next day, Katherine arrived at the nonprofit, her heart pounding with anticipation. The familiar sight of the bustling center brought a sense of comfort to her. Volunteers were sorting through donations, and the smell of fresh coffee wafted through the air. She spotted Jake across the room, his warm smile lighting up his face as he greeted a group of clients. "Hey, Katherine," he called, making his way toward her, his enthusiasm palpable. "I'm glad you could make it." "Hi, Jake," she replied, her heart fluttering. "I wanted to talk to you about some things. It's been a rough few days." "Let's take a walk," he suggested, nodding toward the door. "I could use some fresh air." They stepped outside, the crisp breeze wrapping around them like a comforting embrace. Katherine took a deep breath, inhaling the city's energy. "I had a family meeting last night. My dad is pressuring me to marry someone wealthy, someone like Charles Whitaker." Jake frowned, his brow furrowing. "That sounds tough. You don't have to do what they say, you know." "I know, but it's not that simple. They've built their entire lives around these expectations. I feel like I'm disappointing them if I don't follow through." Katherine ran a hand through her hair, frustration bubbling up again. "But I don't want that life. I want to help people, to make a difference. Like you do." Jake studied her, his expression softening. "You can do both, Katherine. You just need to find the path that feels right for you. It's not easy, but you have the power to choose." His words resonated within her, igniting a flicker of hope. "I just wish it didn't feel so impossible. I want my family to understand, to see the world through my eyes. They may not understand right away, but you have to be true to yourself, and you can't let their expectations dictate your happiness." Jake's eyes sparkled with conviction. "You have a voice. Use it." Katherine felt a rush of gratitude. The warmth of his encouragement enveloped her like a blanket, drowning out her doubts. "Thank you, Jake. Your perspective means so much to me." As they continued their walk, Katherine began to envision a future where she could bridge the gap between her family's expectations and her own desires. With Jake's support, perhaps she could find a way to advocate for those who had been silenced, all while navigating the complexities of her privileged upbringing. Little did she know, the journey ahead would challenge everything she believed about her life and her family, pushing her toward a revelation that would change her forever. Katherine stood in front of the mirror in her penthouse, a sense of determination washing over her like the soft morning sunlight streaming through the floor to ceiling windows. She had made the decision to help Jake, to bridge the gap between her opulent world and the often overlooked reality of the homeless community he served. Her fingers brushed lightly over the fabric of her blouse, and she couldn't help but feel a twinge of nervousness. Organizing a fundraiser was no small task, especially for someone so accustomed to a life of privilege where everything was done for her. "Okay, Katherine, you can do this," she whispered to herself, drawing in a deep breath. She reached for her phone, scrolling through her contacts until she found Jake's name. With a soft tap, she dialed his number and waited, her heart racing with excitement and anxiety. "Hey, Katherine, what's up?" Jake's voice came through, warm and inviting, instantly putting her at ease. "I've been thinking," she began, her words tumbling out. "I want to organize a fundraiser for your nonprofit. I really believe we can make a difference together." There was a moment of silence on the other end, and Katherine could almost hear the gears turning in Jake's mind. "That sounds incredible, but are you sure? Fundraisers can be a lot of work." "I'm sure," she replied, a newfound confidence bubbling within her. "I want to use my resources to help. I want to learn more about what you do and how we can engage the community." Jake chuckled softly. "All right then, let's do it. We can meet at the center tomorrow to brainstorm some ideas." As she hung up the call, Katherine felt a profound sense of purpose. The day she had spent at the nonprofit with Jake had awakened something inside her, a desire to take action, to break free from the gilded cage of her life. She began to jot down ideas excitedly, her pen flying across the page. The next day, Katherine arrived at the nonprofit center, her heart pounding with anticipation. The walls were adorned with pictures of community events and smiling faces, people whose lives had been touched by Jake's organization. She found him in the small conference room, surrounded by a few volunteers who were busy sorting through donations. "Katherine, over here!" Jake waved her over, his smile infectious. She felt a warmth spread through her at the sight of him, a stark contrast to the cold expectations of her family. "Thanks for meeting with me," she said, setting her bag down on the table. "I'm really excited about this fundraiser." Jake nodded, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "So am I. We can start by discussing the kind of event we want. A gala, a community picnic, or maybe even a charity auction." As the two brainstormed ideas, Katherine felt a sense of camaraderie forming between them. They bounced ideas off each other, and she found herself laughing at Jake's witty remarks, his passion igniting a fire within her. "Let's do something that brings people together," Katherine suggested, her eyes lighting up. "What about a community dinner? We could invite local chefs to donate their time and food. It could be a celebration of community and compassion." Jake's expression shifted to one of admiration. "That's a fantastic idea. We can also incorporate stories from the people we serve. It'll show the attendees the real impact of their contributions." As they continued to plan, Katherine's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her father. "We need to talk about the upcoming charity gala. Your future depends on these connections." The words felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. She bit her lip, torn between the expectations of her family and the growing passion she felt for Jake's cause. "Everything okay?" Jake asked, noticing her momentary distraction. "Yeah, just my dad," she replied, forcing a smile. Well, you know how it is." "Family pressure?" Jake raised an eyebrow, his tone sympathetic. "Something like that," she admitted, her heart sinking. "He wants me to focus on connections that benefit our family's business. It's always about the business." Jake nodded, understanding the complexity of her situation. It's hard to break away from those expectations. But remember, you're doing something meaningful here. You're choosing to make a difference. Katherine took a deep breath, trying to shake off the doubt that lingered in her mind. She was determined to push through, to create something that could change lives, not just for the homeless community, but for herself too. As they wrapped up their meeting, Katherine felt invigorated. They had solidified plans for the community dinner, and the excitement among the volunteers was palpable. She made her way home, her mind racing with ideas and possibilities. But as she sat in her sleek living room, the shadows of her father's expectations loomed larger than ever. Days later, as the plans for the fundraiser began to take shape, Katherine was deep in thought when the phone rang again. This time, it was a call from one of her father's business associates. "Katherine, I hope you're sitting down. I have something important to discuss regarding your father's company." Curiosity piqued. She sat up straight. "What is it?" "There are rumors circulating about the way your father's company is handling their charitable donations. Some people believe they are exploiting the homeless for profit. You need to be careful," he warned. Katherine's heart raced as she processed the information. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Her father, the man she had idolized, was potentially profiting from the very people she was trying to help. I need to look into this," she stammered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Just be cautious, Katherine. You don't want to get caught in the crossfire," he advised before hanging up. The weight of the revelation hung heavily on her shoulders. The excitement of the fundraiser dimmed as doubts crept in. Could she really work alongside someone like Jake while her father might be exploiting the homeless community? She felt a surge of anger mixed with confusion. That evening, Katherine met Jake at the nonprofit. She needed to share what she had learned to understand how to navigate this new revelation. As they sat together, she took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "Jake, there's something I need to tell you," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I received a call about my father's company. There are accusations that they're exploiting the homeless for profit." Jake's expression shifted to one of concern. "What do you mean?" "Apparently, they're involved in some unethical practices regarding their charitable contributions. It could mean they're using the homeless as a means to an end," she explained, her voice thick with emotion. Jake leaned back in his chair, digesting the information. "This is serious, Katherine. If it's true, you have to confront him." "I know," she replied, tears welling in her eyes. "But I'm terrified. He's my father. I don't want to believe it, yet I can't ignore what I've heard." Jake reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "You have to follow your heart. If you're committed to making a difference, you can't turn a blind eye to this." His words struck a chord deep within her, igniting a fire she hadn't felt before. "You're right. I can't let fear dictate my actions. I need to confront him." As she prepared to face her father, Katherine felt a mixture of fear and resolve. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but she knew one thing. She would no longer be a passive participant in her life. She would stand for what was right, even if it meant risking everything she had known. The lights of the lavish ballroom shimmered off the walls, casting a warm glow over the elegantly dressed guests milling about. Laughter and the clinking of glasses filled the air, but beneath the surface of the opulence, an undercurrent of tension flowed through Katherine. She stood at the front of the room, her heart racing as she prepared to address the crowd. The fundraiser had been a significant success, exceeding her expectations. Yet the weight of her impending revelation pressed heavily on her shoulders. Katherine glanced at her father, who was surrounded by influential figures, a confident smile plastered on his face. He wore his success like a badge of honor, oblivious to the storm brewing in his daughter's heart. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment to expose the truth about his company's unethical practices. "Ladies and gentlemen," Katherine began, her voice steady but laced with emotion. As she stepped up to the microphone, she could feel the eyes of the room on her. "Thank you all for joining us tonight to support this vital cause. Together, we've raised funds to make a real difference in the lives of those less fortunate." She paused, allowing the applause to wash over her, but her gaze remained fixed on her father, who was now watching her with an expression of curiosity mixed with concern. "However," she continued, "there is something far more important that needs to be addressed." The room fell silent, the jovial atmosphere shifting to one of anticipation. For too long, we have turned a blind eye to the actions of those in power, particularly in the corporate world. Tonight, I want to shed light on a disturbing reality that affects our community: the exploitation of the homeless for profit. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Katherine caught sight of her father's face darkening. My father's company has been implicated in unethical practices, using vulnerable individuals to boost profits while ignoring their needs. This cannot continue. Are you out of your mind? Her father hissed under his breath, but Katherine pressed on, her voice growing stronger. We can no longer allow money to overshadow humanity. It's time for accountability, and it starts with us. Murmurs spread through the guests, some nodding in agreement, while others looked at her with disbelief. Katherine's chest tightened as she spotted Jake at the back of the room, his presence a reassuring beacon. He gave her an encouraging nod, reminding her of the countless conversations they'd shared, the stories of those who had suffered due to greed and indifference. As she continued her speech, Katherine felt a surge of empowerment. We must choose compassion over profit, integrity over greed. The power to change lives lies within us, and it's our responsibility to ensure that everyone has a chance to thrive. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, but it felt distant. She had exposed her father, and a whirlwind of emotions swirled within her, from exhilaration to fear. She could see the fury in his eyes, the way his jaw clenched as he fought to maintain his composure. Just as Katherine thought she had gained the upper hand, Jake stepped forward. "Katherine," he said, his voice calm yet firm, "there's something I need to share." The room fell silent again as all eyes turned to him. With a deep breath, he continued, "For months, I've been gathering evidence regarding the unethical practices of your father's company. I couldn't stand by and watch the suffering of those who have been exploited. I have documents, testimonies, and a plan to bring this to light." Katherine's heart raced as the realization hit her. Jake had been working behind the scenes, driven by a relentless commitment to justice. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been collaborating with a few investigative journalists," he explained. "We're ready to expose the truth, but I wanted you to be part of this. You deserve to know how deep the corruption runs and how your family's wealth has been built on the backs of the vulnerable." Her father's face turned a shade of crimson. "You're both delusional," he spat, his voice rising in anger. "You think you can ruin everything I built? You think anyone will believe you over me?" Katherine stepped forward, emboldened by Jake's words. "They will believe us because we're speaking the truth. People are starting to wake up to the fact that wealth should not come at the expense of others." The tension in the room reached a boiling point as murmurs of disbelief and support echoed around them. Some guests exchanged glances, unsure of what to believe. The air crackled with anticipation, and Katherine realized that this was more than just a confrontation. It was a turning point. "Your company has profited from the suffering of countless individuals," Jake continued, his voice unwavering. "But this is not just about your father, Katherine. It's about all of us standing up for what's right." Her father's face twisted with rage as he tried to regain control of the narrative. "This is slander. I will not allow you to ruin my reputation over unfounded accusations." But Katherine stood firm, her resolve solidified by the support of those around her. "No more lies, Dad. The truth is coming out, whether you like it or not." As the words hung in the air, Katherine felt a sense of liberation wash over her. She had chosen her path, one that aligned with her newfound values. The whispers of doubt that had plagued her were extinguished by the fire of purpose ignited within her. With Jake by her side, they faced the crowd together, united in their mission. "We are here to advocate for those who cannot speak for themselves," Katherine declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "We will not back down until justice is served." The applause that followed was deafening, reverberating through the room as guests rose to their feet, some in support, others in shock. Katherine felt tears prick her eyes as she met Jake's gaze, gratitude and admiration flooding her heart. In that moment, the world felt different. The weight of her past began to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose and clarity. Katherine had not only exposed her father, but had also found her voice, her place in the world. As the event drew to a close, the energy in the room shifted. Many influential guests approached her, expressing their support and commitment to the cause. They were eager to learn more about the nonprofit and how they could help. Jake smiled at Katherine, his pride evident. "You did it," he said softly. "You stood up for what's right, and that's a powerful thing." She nodded, feeling the warmth of their connection. "I couldn't have done it without you. You've shown me a world I never knew existed, and I want to be a part of it." Together, they stepped into the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by their shared mission to advocate for the homeless and ensure that no one would be left behind. As they walked out of the ballroom, Katherine felt lighter, more alive than she had ever felt before.